The snow and the drifts have become so intense that there's hardly any getting through. After the brief thaw and the muddy roadways, we hoped for a short winter, but that didn't come true. In the meantime, heavy haulers had been converted to snowplows in order to make the most important routes to the supply passable for wheeled vehicles. Even for the Russians, it's too much snow, even though they don't have so many problems there with their wide tank tracks. Unfortunately, fuel supply is near impossible since the trucks aren't able to drive on the roadways or main supply road to supply the individual combat groups. Therefore, without further ado, the Panzer convoy was set up, and we can ride sleighs again. I was assigned to the fuel squadron, as we jokingly called it. We are therefore riding with 2 barrels of fuel per sleigh and the little Panzer horses into the assigned sector to supply the tanks. That's again something else for a change, and with a proper winter clothing, also not a problem. In addition, one is always happily welcomed by the comrades when we arrive there. There's always a little something out of the tanker's chest for the delivery. I like that. I could get used to this. The next 5 days we won't be able to lead Rosinante into battle. The Bauer crew has suffered a hit into the forward drive gear, and the repair appears to be more extensive than previously thought. Certainly more items were damaged, but at least the driver didn't get hit, and that's worth a lot in itself. Today we have to supply a battle group who had reconquered a small village. The Russians had already settled forward, so they had to be kicked out again. A few tanks together with the grenadiers fought Ivan down after a tough fight and took prisoners. We are supplying the tanks and also carry provisions. The town is to be taken over by the infantry so that the combat group can move out again. That will take a while though. As it is explained to me, the foot unit has problems with the deep snow. The relocation was taking more time than planned. But they will make it after all. A few hours later, everything is supplied so far, and we're supposed to take back a few wounded and 20 prisoners. I don't like to do this, sitting together with 3 Ivans that way on top of the sleigh, and we're all the way up front. I don't feel good about it, but an order is an order. I'm sitting next to the corporal who's steering the sled, and already have my pistol pulled from the holster. Just so that they won't knock us in the head and then leave us lying in the snow. But there's also comrades behind us, so it can't get that bad. We will indeed need a few hours to get back, but with the sleigh it's quite pleasant. Hardly any wind, and the sun's also showing itself from time to time. We are speeding across the terrain, and I'm thrilled how powerful the little horses are running through the snow. They are apparently quiet though, and really have stamina. The Russians are not causing any trouble. They look as if they had enough of the war. Young lads probably, out of the depth of Russia. The one cautiously asked in a quite decent German whether he could have a cigarette. I give all 3 of them one and allow them to smoke. Now I'm curious and want to know why the Russians know how to speak German. He explains to me that he had family in Germany before the war. He had visited them frequently and therefore learned the language from early on. But when the war broke out, his family was sent back out of Germany. That had happened to many. But when they were back in Russia, they had been locked up as spies and set in a gulag for a time. He had then saved himself into the Red Army in order not to suffer any repercussions as a friend of the Germans. That he spoke the language, he hadn't told anyone. That certainly would have caught attention and not have ended well for him. Now, as a prisoner, it didn't matter either. I inquire where all he had already fought. There are several locations that I heard of. He explains that the losses in his unit had been around 80%, then it had been replenished, and after the next battle, 80% were gone again. Apparently, he'd always been lucky and was able to stay out of the biggest mess. Be it as it may, a nice fellow, but nevertheless a Russian. I tell him he should explain to his comrades that we wouldn't hurt them, but whoever would do anything foolish would get it. We lay the hand off the prisoners in the rear area, and then it will go on for them in the direction of Germany. In the early evening, we arrive back at the supply unit. I have all prisoners do a roll call and hand them over to the men from the staff platoon. Nevertheless, I ask the young Russian, Alexei is his name, whether he'd like to remain with the tanks as a volunteer. He nods, and I check this with the platoon leader. He states that we could use a few more helping hands. After this, another 2 volunteers report. Well, that's how it is. The volunteers are exactly informed what's going on with us here and what all is prohibited. We have to make that very clear to them, otherwise things don't work out with these guys. A few days ago, one of the Russians had stolen a pistol and then wanted to defect back to the Russian lines. He was quickly apprehended and then executed in front of the other volunteers. That always has an effect. The others will think hard whether they want to mess around or not. The next day I'm supposed to go out with the sleigh again and want to take Alexei along. But now, first getting some food and stretching the tired frozen raw limbs. The quarters are nicely warm. The old wood stove is cranking a lot of heat into the bedroom. That gets one tired quickly, and it doesn't take long until one falls into a cozy sleep. The next day a quick conversation with the lieutenant. One more day and we are getting Rosinante back. So again moving fuel and rations to the front. The sleighs are loaded up and we get ready for departure. Today we are supposed to arm ourselves with machine pistols and guns, since in a different sector the supply convoy was attacked by a Russian cavalry unit. So off it goes. Alexei is sitting behind the barrels on the sled. He even appears to be liking it as a volunteer in the German army. And indeed, it doesn't take long until we receive fire near a patch of woods. It's only rifle shots, but even a fuel barrel can ruin one's day if a bullet hits it. We drive the sleds into cover as well as possible and throw ourselves with 3 machine guns into the snow. I give signs that our Russians should bring the ammo from the sled to the machine guns. He jumps ahead like a weasel. Snow splashing up where enemy bullets are impacting, but he makes it safely with the box to the machine gunner. Already the dance is starting. The machine guns are engaging recognized targets. After 10 minutes, the nightmare is over. We are almost certain that the Russians have fled. We are not going to check, therefore mount back up and go. Later we're supplying the vehicles and there's also some hot soup for us right away. We tell about the minor assault on our sleigh convoy and relay the data to the radio operators. That way the combat post is able to mark the area and warn others. Going back, we want to take a detour so that we are not being surprised again. We're just ready to go again with an artillery attack and we're quickly jumping into cover. The barrels are all empty anyway, so there is no danger there. The shells are impacting between the houses and vehicles. We press ourselves deeply into the snow, hoping that the blessing of shrapnel will pass us by. After 10 minutes, the ordeal is over. I'm still in one piece. I look after my sled and see the horse lying in the snow. A piece of shrapnel has torn upon its stomach. The warm entrails are pouring out steaming. In deadly panic, the horse is trying to get back on its feet, and it's getting tangled in its own guts. I draw my pistol and relieve the poor animal. Just now I hear wounded screaming. Everyone is running around to help the comrades. I find Alexei, who is just pressing a bandage onto the chest of an infantry soldier. I assist him and think to myself that he's really being useful. I've seen volunteers before who wouldn't touch an injured soldier. After all, they are still enemies. But he's simply different. After everything has calmed down, we ride back again. The sleighs are particularly hitched behind each other since we don't have enough horses anymore. Be it as may, most importantly, just getting back. When we arrive, I tell the story to the platoon leader, and he can confirm that not all Russians are evil. Yes, everybody has their own opinion, but whatever, that was it for now with these supply runs. In the evening we take over Rosinante again and get everything ready for the next mission. Everything is as it was, but the other tank gunner tells me that we should sight in the main gun again. It was aiming a bit too high. I question the armorer. He replies that we should stop by for some shooting tomorrow morning. That is really important, since here at the Eastern Front, one can't always take 2 or 3 shots. The first shot has to be dead on, otherwise you get knocked on the helmet. Right the next morning we are sighting in. After 3 shots everything is on again. Then we are ready to go. But during the day things remain quiet. We are not on deployment since the Russian first needs to recover from the previous blows.